When I first started expanding my garden, I thought that my small seed starting system would be enough. Spoiler, it wasn't. But after many missteps and some good old DIY ingenuity, I transformed my seed starting game, and I was able to do it all within 2 foot by 4 foot of space. Hi, I'm Randall, and welcome to My Clever Garden. Over the years, I've transformed small, urban spaces to backyard grocery stores. Today, I'm excited to share with you the story of how I went from an inefficient, small seed starting system to a compact, high-yielding grow rack that changed everything. Let me show you how it works and how you can build one too. Like a lot of gardeners, when I first started expanding the amount of food that I was growing, and hopefully food that I produced, I just used what I had. So I used this, commercial made, store-bought, cute little bamboo system, if you will, that worked really well. And I knew it had a few problems, like the lights weren't very easy to move up and down, and so I would have to put things under the tray to try to get the tray lifted up closer to the lights. The other more probably obvious problem right away was that you could only fit one of these trays in it. And so I'd have to wait for a tray to be ready to go and, get acclimated to the outdoors or to my greenhouse, and then plant up another tray and put it in there. So it was very limiting and pretty obvious that that wasn't going to work. So I started researching what market farmers and, commercial nurseries and things like that, what did they use? And I saw a lot of, nurseries, especially that were in more temperate zones than I'm in, where they would use a whole, a greenhouse or a large portion of it to start seeds. Unfortunately, that wouldn't work for me, but it was really cool to see how they, had these benches that could fit all of these 10, 20 trays. And then I saw these indoor sort of rack systems, and they were all self-contained. They're like these shelves, and each shelf could just fit tons of trays on it. And I noticed that the shelves were they're like these sturdy wire racks that anybody can purchase. You see them at restaurants, you can usually buy them at the hardware store. And that's when it hit me, could I buy my own rack fairly inexpensively and sort of make my own? And maybe then it would also kind of fit my space and potentially cost a lot less money. So while my first attempt wasn't perfect, and I'll get to that in a moment here if you hang on with me, it was a good start. I found an inexpensive rack that was, I believe, 64 inches tall, so it would fit within my lower ceilings and sort of my old cellar type of a basement that I have, which was perfect. But it was only 18 inches deep, which at the time I didn't think was that big of a deal. And I found a fairly inexpensive kind of shop type sort of grow light, but not really. And that was the first light. And I put it in there, and it worked really well because it was only about 18 inches deep. And it dawned on me that in my setup, instead of moving the lights, I could make each shelf a slightly different height. And so that was a really good idea, and that worked really well. So I bought some more lights, but this time I read that if I spent just a little bit more, that one light, as long as it could be up far enough, which it actually needs to be because it's powerful, it can't be too close to the tops of the tender plants, it would actually cover 2 foot by 4 foot. So instead of having to have two less expensive shop lights, doubled up like that, I could just have one light. And in the long run, it actually ends up being less expensive. So then on the other shelf, on the farthest shelf on the bottom, I made it even taller because now that I had those lights, I certainly could do that, and they need to be a little farther from those plants that get taller. So instead of moving lights, I moved trays from shelf to shelf. So that worked great. But here's that little problem that made the first one imperfect. The shelves were only 18 inches deep, so that meant that these trays here, they couldn't be stacked across like this. They'd hang over the edges. They wouldn't fit within there, which meant that if I wanted to try to contain it like I saw those fancy ones with, and reflect the light, I'd have to turn them like this, and you could only fit, maybe 2 of them across instead of 4 on every shelf. So it was imperfect, but I knew I was on the right track. So my last challenge, now that I've got the rack and everything, was how do I contain it? Like I saw, like my inspiration, right? And honestly, at first I made it really complicated. I'm pretty handy, so I thought of building some cabinet, which, don't get me wrong, might be really cool, especially if you don't have it in your basement or you just really want it maybe super aesthetically appealing. But then I was like, well, wait a second, what I saw in the pictures, they kind of look like covers. They kind of look like those grow tents, if you've seen them, that people use to commercially grow mushrooms and things like that. And they're 4x6. So I started just searching, and I think it was on Amazon is where I immediately found all of these covers. And the covers are made to cover racks, like if somebody has them in their garage, in order to keep debris and, extremes away from them, right? So they're all also light colored on the inside. They're either white or they're reflective, so that it's easy for people to see things when they open it up, and they go to grab something that they've got stored on that rack. And so I ordered one of those, and there you go. I've got my humidity contained. It's all one system, and I've got material that's reflecting the light back and forth in it. Now with this efficient 2-foot by 4-foot footprint system, I can grow everything I need in a perfectly controlled environment to go out in my backyard grocery store. I've got the right temperature, I've got the right humidity, I've got the right kind of light. All I have to do when a plant gets a little bit taller and is a little bit more mature is I just know to move it down to the rack below it. And when it gets a little bit more mature and maybe a little bit taller, I move it down to the next rack below it. It's really simple. I'm not messing around with lights, and it's the perfect environment for all my little seedlings that I need to go out in my garden. So there you have it, the journey from a single trade cramped setup to a 2x4 super efficient system that provides for my entire garden. If you've ever struggled starting your seedlings, I hope this inspires you to create your own system that works for you. If you're interested in how we grow about 90% of our own produce, check out this other video that I have where I walk through my system outdoors, including my greenhouse, where we use different things like raised beds and grow bags and growing vertically in order to, in a fairly small space, produce that much food. Thanks so much for watching. And until next time, happy gardening.